Hello and welcome to Focus on Israel, which looks at the Holy Land. I'm Paul Calvert. Psalm 27, verse 14 from the New King James Bible says this: Wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. I'm with Pastor Regan King, who is the pastor of the Angel Church in London, and today we're talking about Kiros 2. Now, Pastor Regan, what is Kiros 2?
Well, of course, in order to have Kiros 2, you have Kiros 1 as well. And it's great to be able to join you, Paul, and talk about this. It's so important. The Kiros Palestine document in 2009 was released by the Palestinian Christian Ecumenical Initiative. And on the back of that, we now have this new document, which is being referred to as Kiros 2. It's a moment of truth, faith in a time of genocide. And in this document, there is, under the guise of, kind of pursuing some measure of peace, very much a one-sided perspective on what is going on in the Middle East. There's very acerbic language used. There's language of genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced displacement, apartheid, and everything seems to be Israel's responsibility, including even, you can read the document, almost a rationalization of the horrendous atrocities committed on October the 7th.
Did they speak at all to the Messianic Church in Israel?
There was absolutely no coordination with, no communication with, no perspective shared by Messianic believers. And I'll say, I know you're connected. I'm connected to a range of churches across the land, and they're filled with Arab Israelis, they're filled with Jewish believers, they're filled with internationals. Not a single one of those seems to have been consulted, and certainly if anyone was consulted, their perspective is not shared at all, which is deeply, deeply concerning. For the Church of England to vote to receive, initially they were proposing receive, they changed that to we are going to hear the Kiros 2 document, quite a euphemistic get out clause in one way to allow engagement with it. It basically accepts and it fully embraces this particular part of the narrative without opening the door to say, okay, we're going to read this, we're going to engage with it, but we desperately want to hear the other perspective of this. We are aware that there's another perspective, and we want to engage with that. They've not even done that, and that's deeply, deeply distressing and concerning, not only to the Jewish community that feels betrayed by the Church of England, but also frankly, to Jewish believers and indeed most believers across the land of Israel who will hear of this document will find it very troubling indeed.
Is this very one-sided? Does it give any point of view from as an Israeli perspective, from a biblical perspective, I will give you this land as an eternal covenant? Does it speak anything about the history of Israel? King David, Jesus was here in the land. It was Jewish. Is there anything that can actually remotely point to any of the history of the land?
Yeah, a very big problem with the document, Paul, is that it actually seems to erase the important role, in fact, the critical primary role, one could say, of the Jewish people in the Bible story. There doesn't seem to be any realization or appreciation of Israel as having any legitimacy in the land. In fact, the terminology of settler colonial project is used throughout, and there's a denial of the indigenous nature of the people to the land itself. So it's framed as we are the people who are the direct descendants of those in the Bible stories. We are the descendants of the early church. We are the ones, and it's framed in that particular way, which is, it's just historically inaccurate and dishonest. If anyone actually believes that, it's incredibly disingenuous. But the terminology of Zionism and Christian Zionism is used always in a negative in this document. There's, in fact, and I would say it's kind of, it's almost like a red flag that one would expect with any cult to say, basically, boycott all engagement. Don't talk with people who call themselves Zionist or Christian Zionist. Don't engage with those organizations. Don't discuss anything. That's very, very problematic. And I think is largely because there's a very real concern that the other perspective, the truth of the matter, will be heard. There's that biblical principle, that proverb that says one tells his side of the story, then another comes along and the full of the matter is revealed. That's very, very much what's going on here.
Is the foundation of this document replacement theology?
I think very much so. I think replacement theology has a role, definitely, this sort of supersessionistic idea. I think perhaps maybe that's open for debate and discussion. I think a more significant influence, however, is liberation theology, which is, this kind of, it pits everything in the perspective of the oppressed and the oppressor. It shows everything in the perspective of these kind of socially Marxist worldviews, wherein you have a grouping of people who are struggling, they're hard done by in some way, there's grievances that are there, and the gospel message is one of resistance and breakout and liberation and freedom from that. And first of all, that's not the gospel. The gospel is not a message of resistance. It's a message of repentance. It's a message not of fighting with the carnal weapons of this world, but is recognizing that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. I want to be very clear. I fully recognize and accept that there are people in the Palestinian territories that are suffering. That is without question. That is inarguable. There are people who are really going through difficult times. Every time I'm there, I try to go into the West Bank area. Several years ago, I did actually, once upon a time, try to access Gaza. That didn't happen in the end. But the reality of suffering is there. However, the root cause of it, there's no honesty in the Kiros 2 document concerning. There's no recognition of the ongoing responsibility and culpability of Hamas and the innumerable Palestinian terror factions across the decades for the ongoing plight of the Palestinian people. And there's no ownership or responsibility or mourning or repentance for the atrocities that have been routinely committed. And it doesn't begin on the 7th of October. This goes back. So many opportunities for peace have been given out. Even one can think of some of the discussions during the presidency of Bill Clinton, where there was an extreme amount, 97% of the West Bank, incredibly generous offer that could have been, accepted, but continual refusals and rejections. And that's been a very, very big problem, withholding peace, withholding the possibility of peace. The document also troublingly speaks to the conflict in Gaza in the framework of even martyrdom. That it speaks of the martyrs that have died in this, and it leaves one thinking, okay, this is presenting as a Christian document this recent conflict that cost a great deal of life, yes, began after a full-on assault that took over 1,000 civilians' lives, that held hundreds hostage. What was Israel supposed to do in that situation? I know that if the UK or the US was to experience some comparable attack, the consequences, the fallout of that would have been even more severe than what Israel accomplished in Gaza.
Now, liberation theology sounds biblical. It sounds like something Jesus would do. But really, we have to remember that there are the promises of God, and God made a promise to the Jewish people, and that sort of supersedes this nicey theology, doesn't it?
Well, the promises of God and the covenants that God has made are irrevocable. And, you have in the Bible those covenants that are conditional and those that are unconditional. You have promises that are conditioned in particular ways. In Deuteronomy, there is the recognition that if the people go astray, that there will be particular curses, but there is a promise of restoration, of blessing. And throughout the scriptures, there's that recognition. There's going to be a period of exile, even exiles. You see it throughout the book of Judges, different periods of subjugation, different periods of exile. But ultimately, as the people turn to the Lord, as the Lord works in his sovereignty, he brings the people back. And you see throughout the prophetic witness the same, even in relation to the understanding of the early church, that there seems to have been a very clear understanding that there would be ultimate restoration. And the history, really, even I would just say, is it's relevant. The Church of England does have a heritage of individuals who recognize the promises of God and their enduring, ongoing significance. William Wilberforce, a very, very prolific character, of course, well known for the abolition of the slave trade and his involvement with the Clapham sect, but also specifically spoke up for the Jewish people, was an advocate for restoration of the Jewish people to their land long before Balfour. Right, and then you have individuals like Charles Simeon, who spoke and preached in an almost prophetic way concerning the promises of God and the eventual restoration. Bishop J.C. Ryle, first Bishop of Liverpool, just incredible in the messages he gave and the clarity of them in the literal significance of God being fulfilled. And then, of course, you have other statesmen like Balfour. You have individuals who were used by God to apply that. And, we've seen even in the ongoing debate and discussion and such, there are many within the Church of England who they do believe in the right responsibility of Israel and its people. They do believe in the cause of just peace. They do believe in the reconciliation that comes through the proclamation of the gospel. They are compassionate toward those in the Palestinian-controlled territories, but they recognize the complexity, where there is complexity of the matter, but they recognize the truth of the matter.
Do you feel the Church of England is making a political statement? We are pro-Palestinian?
Yeah, on that 100%. I think that's unquestionable. One of the Church of England's missions is CMJ, which is the church's mission to the Jews. Okay, CMJ was started out of Wilberforce, and there were others alongside. It's very, very active there. Of course, you have Christ Church in Jerusalem, which is an Anglican church. It's the first Anglican church in the land. One of the very first, some people even say the first church in the modern era in the land. So, you look at this and you're thinking, okay, there's a bit of a dissonance here between the hierarchy in the Church of England and what's going on in an evangelical way in Israel itself and for the Jewish people themselves. And I did consult. I consulted with some people I know who are connected in the Church of England to that mission and have contact with people at Christ Church. And the Archbishop of Canterbury recently traveling over to the Holy Land, it has been confirmed to me that there was no consultation at all, no visitation at all with representatives of CMJ or with representatives of Christ Church, which to me is just, it's staggering. It shows that you are taking one particular perspective, one particular side. I'll just add that, you have individuals who are in the Palestinian-controlled territories who, yes, they profess Christ. Yes, they are leaders in churches, and yet their doctrine is not consistent with that what we see in Scripture. It's not following to or adhering or recognizing in any way the ongoing significance of the promises of God. You even had some who, the day after October the 7th was a Saturday, on the Sunday when some of the churches gathered, there were even messages that were given that came across as praising those terrorists who committed the atrocities in the Gaza envelope on that day.
Well, you've created a petition for people to sign against Kiros too. Why did you want to do that?
There was a sense of righteous consternation, indignation, a sense of someone has to do something. Someone has to say something. And yes, there are individuals who did speak up at General Synod. There are individuals who have spoken to this in various ways. But, we are surrounded where I am in London by Jewish friends. We have many Jewish friends. Half of my family is Jewish and as well. And so many, I see it on a regular basis, are bereft. So many feel betrayed, and so many automatically assume Christian, that means you're anti-Jewish. that's the narrative. So someone had to do something.
Yeah, it does sound like this Kiros 2 document is actually damaging all the work that the Christians have done, the evangelical church have done to actually embrace the Jewish people. It just basically puts it to tatters, does it?
It's not helped. It's not helped, and not quite. This wasn't really on my agenda for this week. This wasn't on my schedule as such, but I felt that there was such an urgency of the moment for someone to stand up and speak up and do something and show the Jewish people, no, hold on. These guys, they do not represent all of us. They do not represent all of us. You have many who love you and who care for you, who see you, and who are not going to leave you just kind of laying in the wake, as it were. Certainly, there were multiple warnings. This is what's deeply frustrating. Multiple warnings from Jewish organizations, from Jewish leaders, or from Christians involved in Jewish mission and outreach who are saying, not a good time, not a good idea. This is never going to be a document that should be engaged with in a serious way in Synod for all of these particular reasons. This is not a good faith attempt to achieve reconciliation. This document desires the erasure of Israel. It desires the erasure of the Jewish people from the land. That's what it's calling for. It denies the legitimacy of the nation that is Israel, and adheres to, a political ideology and a political nationality even it did not even have this nationalized setup until 1964. So, there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of history. I encourage people to do some study on it. I encourage people to do a great deal of research, and I think you will discover the truth.
Now, you're in London. What's it like being in London since October the 7th?
Well, the day itself saw people dancing in the street in Edgware Road and giving out sweets, honking their horns in celebration. Within a week, there was already a significant protest movement that had been galvanized to go even into Jewish communities and into Jewish areas with Palestinian flags. And before there was any meaningful military response, there was already the claim of genocide. This is the thing. It was already the claim. The claim was there. That they already had the posters, they already had the T-shirts, they already had everything up and going, and just full-blown rationalization of heinous evil. I've heard people in writing and conversation legitimize and defend and excuse and even praise and celebrate the actions of October the 7th. There have been individuals who have openly vandalized synagogues and places of importance to the Jewish community. We in our church as well have had individuals come in, bad actors as such, come in and seek to create disruption and distress. And, this is the difficulty. You have Jewish family, you have Jewish friends. There's not a single one who doesn't have a story of some heinous anti-Semitic attack or slur that has been levied at them in this season.
What's your prayer for the Jewish people at this time in London, in the UK?
My prayer is ultimately that God would give his perfect peace. As a follower of Jesus, I believe that peace is found in a Messiah. I do believe that the law, the writings, and the prophets point to Yeshua as Messiah. But my prayer is that the Jewish community will know peace and will know God's love and care, and that they will know that there are people, that there are many of us who see, who love them, who care for them, and will continue to do so come what may.
How can people find your petition and sign it? Is there a website address anywhere they can find it?
Yes, there absolutely is. The petition itself is called a Christian Declaration Against Kiros, and this is declaration-against-kiros.com.
Well, Pastor Regan, thank you very much for sharing today.
Bless you, Paul. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Pray that God will move by his mighty power in the Holy Land and bring his peace.